Story recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a comedy, horror, and thriller film called Val. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. One hot day, Officer Myers and Daughtry pursue a criminal on the run. The two then split up to find their guy faster, and Daughtry soon sees him running and about to hide. With her gun in hand, Daughtry orders the criminal to put his hands in the air and back up towards her slowly. She then tells him to get down on his knees and lace his fingers behind his head, leaving him with no choice but to comply. However, the criminal, Finn, suddenly attacks Daughtry when she goes near him, but the officer still tries to fight back and accidentally gets shot. Moments later, the home invasion committed by Finn is reported in the news. Meanwhile, a high-class woman of the night named Val puts on her makeup while reciting some tongue twister in front of the mirror. Then, she gets distracted by a sudden banging on the door, so she goes downstairs to see who her visitor is. However, she doesn't find anyone outside, but it isn't long before she comes face to face with intruder Finn. Scared, Val screams for help, but Finn quickly covers her mouth. So, Val bites his hand and runs upstairs, where she finds a phone and uses it to hit Finn in the head. Unfortunately, Finn immediately gets up and grabs a knife to threaten Val, instructing her to sit down. Then, Finn asks Val why she's dressed like that, and she reveals what she does for a living. Val also adds that she's expecting a man to arrive any minute, but she fails to protest when Finn orders her to call the guy and tell him not to come. However, Val soon changes her mind and tells Finn she's scared to cancel her meeting with her client, saying that guy is dangerous. Despite that, Finn forces Val to do what he asked, but he quickly stops her when he thinks she's calling the cops. Exasperated, Val insists she's calling her client and realizes the helicopters outside are for Finn. She also offers to help Finn, but the guy only gets pissed and threatens to kill her if she gets in his way. Desperate, Val tells Finn to get her money from the safe downstairs in the basement and hide there as long as he wants. Then, Finn asks Val for rope or tape, but he soon feels dizzy and throws up. Val says he probably has a concussion, but Finn just ignores her and asks her to take him to the safe. Once they're in the basement, Val immediately starts opening the safe. However, her visitor soon arrives, and despite being reluctant, Finn lets her answer the door. Then, Val lets her client, Freddy, inside the house, and the guy says he feels like he's not supposed to be there. But Val just ignores Freddy and puts a dog collar on him before leading him to another room, aware that Finn is watching them. Feeling dizzy again, Finn heads to the kitchen to look for something to eat or drink. Unfortunately, all he finds is some curdled milk, so he just returns to the basement. There, Finn quietly hides where he hears Val coming downstairs with Freddy, who thinks there's someone else in the house. So, Finn punches Freddy when he finds his hiding place and tries to flee, and the two get into a physical fight. But in the end, Finn manages to choke and kill Freddy using the dog collar. After that, Finn angrily tells Val to open the safe. However, another visitor arrives upstairs, so they both check to see who it is. Unfortunately, they soon realize that two cops are waiting outside. Officer Myers and Daughtry are going door to door to look for Finn, but Val manages to send them away without raising suspicions. Once the cops are gone, Val asks Finn if he killed someone. However, Finn doesn't answer her question and starts feeling dizzy again, remembering his girlfriend before passing out. Later on, a disoriented Finn wakes up in the bathtub and realizes he accidentally cut his arm with a knife when he collapsed. At the same time, Finn wonders why Val is being nice to him, so Val says it's because she's sure that Freddy's men will come after them, and she hopes Finn will defend her. However, Finn doesn't really care about Val and reminds her how dangerous he is, so she'd stop messing with him. Still, Val refuses to leave him alone and asks about the person he killed, wondering what happened. Unfortunately, Finn isn't in the mood to answer Val's questions and simply says he'll hide in her house until the cops give up looking for him. Then, they get distracted by a sudden banging on the wall, so Val lends Finn one of her robes before searching for the source of the noise. Seconds later, they find Freddy creating the noise, but Finn briefly looks away when he hears someone knocking on the door. Finn then realizes that Freddy looks different, but he doesn't even have time to react because Freddy suddenly bangs his head against the wall. After that, Freddy heads downstairs to escape, and Finn quickly follows him. Unfortunately, the big guy is already gone, and all Finn can do is ask Val who was at the door. So, Val points out that she wasn't lying when she said Freddy was dangerous, making Finn realize he's not safe there. With no other choice, Finn finally decides to leave and takes a knife, but Val reminds him he has nowhere to go. Then, Val asks Finn why the cops are after him, but he doesn't answer her question again and heads to the basement to get the money. However, Finn gets surprised when he finds the safe empty, immediately assuming that Freddy has the cash. Fed up, Finn searches for Freddy outside and eventually finds him in the garden. Then, the big guy walks towards Finn and gets stabbed, but he just casually pulls the knife out of his belly. After that, Freddy tackles Finn to the ground while Val watches from the balcony, and it isn't long before Finn repeatedly bashes the man's head with a rock. A few minutes later, Val offers Finn a drink and apologizes for what happened, but Finn sees right through her and realizes she's been lying about everything, saying he now knows no one is coming for them. Finn believes Val set the whole thing up to mess with him, but the woman just changes the subject. Val then starts talking about Finn's life and how he's looking for someone to blame for all the pain he's gone through, trying to figure out what kind of person he really is. However, Finn just chooses to keep quiet and walk away, leaving Val to her thoughts. Despite being injured and exhausted, Finn retrieves his clothes from the washing machine and returns to the house. There, he watches the news about the man he killed, Brian Foley, and he cries as he sees his photo on television. Meanwhile, Val, who is revealed to be a demon, starts a ritual by lighting a candle and holding her Holy Roman knife. Seconds later, Val informs Finn that she already hid Freddy's body. Then, she notices that Finn is watching the news and asks what really happened, saying she's just curious. However, Finn just tells her to stop asking questions because it's none of her business. So, Val tries to diffuse the tension by undressing and using her charm on Finn, but the guy simply pushes her away. Unfortunately for Finn, Val is not one to accept rejection. She then follows Finn around the house as he looks for food and suddenly kisses him, but Finn finds it hard to trust her. So, Val tells Finn to get whatever he wants from the refrigerator before walking away, but all Finn sees is a small box of food filled with worms. With nothing to eat, Finn decides just to drink. He also tries to stop Val from taking a shower, but she's done listening to him. Finn then follows Val to the bathroom and sits on the floor as she takes a shower, ignoring the woman when she invites him to join her. At the same time, Finn suddenly remembers his girlfriend, Jenny. In a flashback, it is revealed that it was Jenny's idea to rob Brian, who was actually her father. However, Finn didn't want to do it because Brian has always been nice to him. Unfortunately, Jenny was determined to get her hands on the $639,000 stashed up in Brian's house, and she was confident that her father wouldn't report her to the cops. So, in the end, Finn did what Jenny wanted. Once he was inside Brian's house, Finn forced the man to tell him where he kept the money he stole from his employees. However, Brian claimed he had no idea what he was talking about, adding that one of his administrators discovered that millions of dollars were missing from their accounts. Brian was actually talking about Jenny, who stole money from him and was just looking for someone to pin it on. Unfortunately, after sharing that information with Finn, Brian started to have a heart attack. Finn could only look at Brian in horror before finally going out to leave, but he soon realized that Jenny had just betrayed him. Jenny left Finn there to deal with her father, and when Brian finally died, Finn was forced to take the man's car to escape. Back in the present, Val asks Finn to hand her a towel. However, Finn refuses and tells Val to reuse the old one, eventually pissing her off. Val then calls Finn a sandhog, confusing him because that's what Jenny used to call him. Of course, Val is quick to come up with an answer and says she knows he digs tunnels for a living, but Finn wants to know who told her that. However, Val doesn't answer his question and prepares to go to bed, ignoring Finn when he tries to stop her and points out she's been doing everything she wants all day. So, Finn asks Val if she thinks she controls him, but once again, Val changes the subject and says he should be thanking the person who sculpted him into something useful. Because of that, Finn follows Val to her room to know if she thinks he's soft for not killing her, and soon they end up talking about his life. Needless to say, Val eventually asks Finn about Brian because she's dying to find out what really happened. She also asks him what he wants in life, so Finn admits it's money. Finn reveals he wants to go to Brazil, the place Jenny wanted to visit. Then, Val talks about how she earned her money, wondering if Finn knows what happened to it. At the same time, Val says there was $639,000 in the safe, surprising Finn that she knows that. Val then asks Finn if he's still dizzy and confused, and when the woman gets up from her chair, her reflection in the mirror remains seated. At that moment, Finn realizes Val knows everything about him and that she put something in his drink, but he freezes and fails to do something about it. So, Val continues to talk and guesses what Finn really wants in life, which is independence. Seconds later, Finn comes to his senses when someone knocks on the door. Val then answers the door and sees Myers and Daughtry, while on the other hand, Finn hides upstairs. This time, Val lets Daughtry inside and asks Myers to check out back, telling him to look for signs of forced entry. Daughtry cautiously searches the house, and it isn't long before Finn surprises her from behind. Of course, Daughtry advises Finn to turn himself in so as not to make things worse, but Finn knows he'll spend the rest of his life in prison if he does that. Then, Daughtry slowly gets up and faces Finn, revealing Brian is alive and was rushed to the hospital. Because of that, Finn finally decides to let Daughtry cuff him, but he notices her wound is bleeding. Despite that, Daughtry still tells Finn to turn around and get on his knees, and that's when Val steps in and controls the officer. Finn wants to know what Val did to Daughtry, but the woman makes it clear it doesn't matter and admits she knows about Brian. Val then asks Finn if he remembers how he got there, and when he tries to think about it, he realizes that Val set the whole thing up. As it dawns on Finn that he's in trouble, he quickly starts screaming for help. However, Val simply ignores Finn and takes out a rulebook that was created by higher beings. Val then reads the first and only rule, which states she can't decide what happens to Finn. After that, she lets Finn know he has the freedom of choice, but she also reminds him his soul is being judged. Once Val tells Finn what he needs to know, she offers to give him everything he desires as long as he stays with her and her girls forever. As it turns out, the mannequins in her basement are alive, and she also reveals she's the Duchess of the Underworld and her real name is Valifar. Val says she'll give Finn everything that Jenny wouldn't, but Finn doesn't want to listen to her anymore and flees. Unfortunately, Val's mannequin girls stop Finn, and the Duchess tries to make him see that he's throwing away his chance to be happy. However, Finn doesn't care about that anymore and just wants to get out of that place, so he runs away from them and locks himself in the bathroom. Sadly, Finn's nightmare isn't over yet, only this time he has to face an evil version of Freddy. Then, Finn suddenly finds himself with Jenny, but that's just an illusion too. Seconds later, Finn realizes he's back at Val's house. Finn is seated at the table with the Duchess and her underlings, and he wants to know why Val chose him. So, Val replies that it's because he's willing to do anything for Jenny, which is the kind of commitment she's been searching for. Val then promises Finn he'll be free if he commits himself to her, but Finn thinks the Duchess is out of her mind. Determined to get Finn on her side, Val summons his dead mother. She also tries to manipulate Finn by using Daughtry's head, thinking he'll feel guilty for what happened to her and eventually join her. Then, Val tells Finn he'd be a god in that place and have anything he wants, but he has to drive the Holy Roman knife through Daughtry's skull and take her soul. Unfortunately for Val, Finn refuses to hurt anyone else and says he'd rather go to hell. Val then reminds Finn how he almost went to prison because of Daughtry and urges him to do as she says, but all Finn wants is for the Duchess to send him back. So, Val sends Finn back to the moment where Daughtry is about to arrest him, and this time he doesn't fight back. Sadly, Finn has no idea that Val still has her eyes on him.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.